It's the NUFC Monday Show and we've got reaction to the Saga Cup weekender, news of a third bid for Crystal Palace defender Marc Guehi, and we'll take a look at the situation with Chelsea winger Noni Madueke as Newcastle could be set to go in for the player. Let's get into it. Hello, welcome back to the NUFC Monday Show. It does feel like it's been a while since I did one of these videos. It's because I was filming the Saga Cup vlog for 2 days and I really enjoyed being back at St James's Park. If you haven't seen the video, I'll link it down in the description. There's lots of insight behind the scenes at the club, reaction to the games and talking about the transfer situation. We'll get more into that in this video, but also I did a piece for the BBC Sport website which was published today, basically explaining the whole situation with Newcastle's difficulties in pre-season, with PSR situation, the boardroom changes, Eddie Howe's future, that situation in Germany, but also I think how Newcastle have reflected on that and come out the other side. I think there could have been a position, especially with no transfer links and no major signings through the door yet, that Newcastle could have been hobbling into this game against Southampton on the verge of a crisis. They're absolutely not doing that. Although they would like some deals to be done, they are really in a strong position. They look fit, they look energetic, there's a good harmony in the squad, and that's really reflected in the piece. So if you hadn't read that, I'll link that down to the description below, but also do check out the Saga Cup video as well. Channel update will finally be coming this week. I'll lay out what my plan is for the new season, but I will be taking a 2-week break because I'm going to cover the Paralympics on Friday week, so I will be away in Paris for 2 weeks. I might be able to do a couple of videos, but that is very much not in the pipeline because I don't know what my structure is, I don't know what my schedule is, so don't hold your breath on that. But once I'm back, the content will be ramping up again and we'll be going at it from then. And also there will be a live stream previewing the Premier League on Wednesday at 5 o'clock, so do check that out as well. More information on what's coming next in the channel update, which hopefully will be out tomorrow. We'll get straight into this with the news of Marc Guehi and the third Newcastle United bid for the Crystal Palace defender. £60 million is what I'm led to believe it is. £55 million plus £5 million in add-ons, which is £5 million more than was previously offered in the last bid, and that's closed, and that's halved the deficit between the two clubs in terms of valuation. So Newcastle believe that they can get this deal done, and wouldn't be surprised if this is their last offer, or at least they're telling Crystal Palace this is their last offer, because they know the situation with Marc Guehi, as I've alluded to on these videos before. 2 years left in his contract. The fact that he wants to leave, he wants to move, everyone around the table is keen to get an agreement in place, and Palace have got 2 possible centre-back options lined up, Kasunu from Bayer Leverkusen and Lacroix from Wolfsburg as well, which means that Newcastle could have the door left open for them to go and get Marc Guehi. It looks like this could happen. It's over the weekend that the bid was launched. It hasn't been rejected yet. Make of that what you will. It could be completely moot if we hear tonight that the bid's been rejected, but for me this sounds a little bit more positive. It's much closer to the Crystal Palace valuation. I think this is as far as Newcastle will be willing to go. They have made Marc Guehi their main target though, that's as much as clear. They have now properly stepped away from, at least for the time being, Malik Thiaw. They might look back at that in a few days' time if this deal doesn't come off, but for now it really feels, the fact that everyone is still around the table, the fact that Crystal Palace is still open to talking about it, the fact that Marc Guehi is still so keen on Newcastle, it feels like this one has that sort of energy that will get done. It feels Sven Botman-like, it feels Tino Livramento-like, where it's just about the price tag. It's not about convincing anybody. Personal terms shouldn't be an issue. He will slot right in, Marc Guehi, next to Fabian Schär or Dan Burn initially, then hopefully Sven Botman once Botman returns from his injury in January time. So this is a really massive signing. I've explained why it's massive in previous videos. I think everybody's aware of his quality. He isn't the best in the air, but in terms of bringing the ball out from the back, in terms of pace, physicality, and strength, he's very much what Newcastle are looking for in a defender, to transform that defence, add pace at the back. That's what Newcastle have lacked, and it was really exposed badly last season, especially when they couldn't press high, which obviously they did really well at the weekend in the Saga Cup. That was a massive thing that I made a point of saying in the last video, was about how Newcastle were a pressing team again, and the whole team looks like it could be back to its best, and that's really good. And then you add Marc Guehi into that, which is more pace, more quality on the ball and a more ability to control games, I think it'll take Newcastle to a completely new level. So new bid for Marc Guehi has gone in today. No news that it's been rejected, but also no news it's been accepted yet. But lots of people talking about why he was in Crystal Palace. First of all, why he was pictured returning to training, and then why he played in the pre-season friendly at the weekend, because there hasn't been a deal agreed. He's a Crystal Palace player, he's professional, he's going to do his job, and you would expect the same from a Newcastle player in exactly the same situation. And Marc Guehi has done his job, he's been professional, but I think now it does feel a little bit like this is ramping up. Tino Livramento played in the pre-season friendly for Southampton last season, a week before joining Newcastle. This is the same sort of thing, I think. For me, this is a very, very close deal now. I think this one, we could be in a situation where this deal is agreed in the next coming days. Obviously, if you're listening to this and the bid's been rejected, I would be interested to see from Newcastle's perspective whether they go in for a new bid, whether they look at other options. But I think they are ramping up on making a sense about their main priority, and I'll explain why in the next segment. But Marc Guehi could be through the door in the next few days, because this bid is 55 million plus 5 million in add-ons. It's about roughly only a few million less than what Palace want. And given their situation, given the fact that he has already rejected talks of a new contract in previous years, that ship sailed. They're not going to keep him. It's just in terms of getting the right deal. And I think the fact that they've got their own centre-back targets that they want to look at as well means that they will want to move this deal on quickly as possible as well. I think this could be the deal that gets sorted. But again, if you're watching this in a couple of days and it's been rejected, it'll be interesting to see where Newcastle go from here. The obvious other thing, subplot, is that Fulham have been interested in Joachim Andersen, who's obviously a previous Newcastle target as well. £20 million bid went in over the weekend. Palace want 40 million, so we'll see in terms of how that plays into the Guehi situation. But more likely, Marc Guehi will be leaving the Crystal Palace this summer and hopefully to Newcastle United this week. And the other thing to talk about, as I mentioned on the Seller Cup vlog, I said I would talk more about it in the Monday show, is Noni Madueke, the Chelsea winger, being linked with Newcastle once again. Newcastle's interest is long-standing. I brought it to you weeks ago. Lots of journalists have said the same thing. It's not a secret. Newcastle have drawn up different price points of targets for right wing and for centre-back. Madueke is one of the cheaper options. Madueke is a player that is more or less in Newcastle's price range. Certainly not, perhaps not now because the money that they're spending on Guehi, but for a straight up permanent signing. But there is definitely ways of being creative that I think would tempt Chelsea into a deal. He has obviously been used quite a lot in pre-season, including on Sunday against Inter at Stamford Bridge. So he might well be in Enzo Maresca's plans. But Pedro Neto going there has certainly thrown the cat amongst the pigeons in terms of a lot of those players. Raheem Sterling, Madueke is one of those players as well. I mentioned Pedro Neto last week or the week before about possibly being a Newcastle target again. And I think that was once they went for Guehi, as I've said, their possibility of getting a right midfielder in at that price point was always going to be unlikely. He has in fact moved, as was suggested by Gary O'Neill, at the right price, 63 million euros. Is that really what Newcastle can afford to pay for a player with not the greatest stats? Let's be honest. I still think he's a very good player. I still think he carried Wolves brilliantly last season and at times whenever he's been fit. But the fitness issues and the lack of great output means that 63 million euros is a lot of money to spend on a player. And I know it's upset a lot of neutrals or non-Chelsea fans that Chelsea keep on doing this, but honestly it feels like they're just chaotic and looking for an identity that I think that somebody like Noni Madueke could benefit from at Newcastle. He, by the sounds of it, is keen to stay at Chelsea and fight for his place, but if he's available, if there's a deal to be done, I think Newcastle would be at the front of the queue for that. The fact that they have already done a loan with an obligation to buy deal in Lewis Hall last season means that they could try that again. Chelsea are apparently not open to a loan with an option to buy. Obligation might change it. As I said, Fabrizio Romano's tweeted earlier on today to say that Chelsea's attention will turn to outgoings, and Raheem Sterling and Noni Madueke could be on that list. Newcastle's interest is long-standing. He was an option of a cheaper variety compared to a Neto or an Mbumo or the names that we've talked about throughout the summer. But I think this is a deal that could absolutely be done. And I think this is a really, really interesting one for me. I've said that before. For me, A lot of people have said that he's not good enough. He saw on the live stream people saying that he isn't strong enough. There's lots of questions about his physicality and his technique, but I think Eddie Howe can get a tune out of him that Chelsea just haven't, because they haven't been able to get a structure in place to get the best out of a player who's got his talent. He went to PSV Eindhoven and became a real threat for them on that right-hand side. Chelsea was a bad move, and there's a lot of players I think we've seen with Kai Havertz, and we've seen with a few others, and we will see with a few others. Conor Gallagher's another one possibly, that leaving the club, and there's a lot more quality in the Chelsea team than their position suggests. Arsenal are looking to win the title this season. They went and got Kai Havertz, who was viewed as a Chelsea reject, and got a real tune out of him. I think Newcastle can do the same with Noni Madueke, and I would really look at this as a possibility, particularly if Newcastle will look to exercise the same thing that they did with Lewis Hall, with a loan with an obligation to buy. Option seems unlikely from a Chelsea perspective. I think they need to recoup as much money as they possibly can. It's down the line, perhaps potentially, but they only spent 30 million on him, and he hasn't improved. If anything, he's regressed. His value has shrunk. So Newcastle could do a deal at a decent price here. I think this is definitely one to watch. Newcastle's interest is genuine. It's long term, and I think might well be the main right wing target between now and the end of the window. Eddie Howe said at the weekend that Newcastle were looking to get at least one player in, and it had to be a player who would make a massive difference to the team. Marc Guehi is definitely that. I think Noni Madueke is that as well. Thanks very much for joining me on this video. Please like, share and subscribe. I'll be back tomorrow with a channel update, but also live on Wednesday night at 5 o'clock for the Premier League preview show. Do join me then. I want to hear all your questions. I want to hear all your interactions. Give me your thoughts about Newcastle ahead of the season, and I'll see you then. Cheers.